Ladies and gentlemen, every once in a while, there comes a moment when science doesn't just whisper the truth. It cries out for us to listen. Tonight I want to talk about one of those truths. It's a truth that hides quietly in our medicine cabinets, in our bedside drawers, sometimes even in the very pills we've trusted for decades to help us sleep, calm our nerves, or relieve our allergies. It's a truth about a hidden drug, one that millions take every single day, unaware that it may be silently eroding the very organ that defines who we are, our brain. Now, before we dive into the science, I want you to imagine someone you might know. Her name is Margaret. She's 72, retired, bright, and full of life. A grandmother of 4, she loves gardening, puzzles, and her evening tea ritual. But over the past year, she's noticed something subtle, something easy to brush off at first. She forgets names mid-sentence. She misplaces her glasses twice a day. She begins to doubt herself, wondering, is this normal aging, or is something wrong with me? When Margaret came to my clinic, she brought with her a bag of medications, neatly organized, sleep aids, bladder pills, something for allergies. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But as I looked at her list, one ingredient caught my eye: diphenhydramine, an old, familiar antihistamine, better known by its brand name, Benadryl. It's been on pharmacy shelves for decades. It's safe, right? Over the counter. No prescription needed. But that night, I explained to her something that shocked her, and, I suspect, might shock you tonight. That little pill, that innocent white tablet taken to just help her sleep, was part of a class of drugs known as anticholinergics. These are medications that block a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, a chemical messenger absolutely vital for memory, learning, and attention. You see, acetylcholine is the spark that helps brain cells talk to each other. It keeps our neural networks alive, vibrant, communicating. When you block it, especially over time, it's like dimming the lights in the house of your mind, one bulb at a time. For decades, these drugs have been prescribed casually, sometimes even encouraged for older adults who struggle with insomnia, anxiety, or bladder control. But over the past 15 years, research has revealed something profoundly unsettling. Long-term use of strong anticholinergic medications is associated with a significantly higher risk of cognitive decline, memory loss, and even dementia. I remember the first time I saw the data laid out in a study from the University of Washington. It was one of those moments where science hits you in the gut. They followed more than 3,000 older adults for over a decade. Those with the highest exposure to anticholinergic drugs, meaning years of cumulative use, had a 54% greater risk of developing dementia than those who didn't use them. And this wasn't a one-off. Subsequent studies from Harvard, from the UK's Biobank Project, from major neurology journals, all found similar trends. Yet here's the part that breaks my heart. Most people have no idea they're even taking these drugs. They hide behind familiar names: sleep aids, motion sickness tablets, cold medicines, antidepressants, bladder control medications. And because many are available over the counter, people assume they're safe for daily use, even for years. But the brain doesn't see over the counter. The brain only sees chemistry, and chemistry has consequences. Margaret's story wasn't unique. A few months after her visit, a man named Harold came to see me. He was 68, a retired engineer who had always prided himself on his sharp memory. He carried a quiet confidence, the kind of person who solved crossword puzzles in ink. But recently, he found himself struggling to remember the names of tools, forgetting routes he'd driven for decades. His wife said, "It's like he's fading in and out." When I asked about his medications, he mentioned taking something to help with urinary urgency, oxybutynin, another strong anticholinergic. When we discussed the link between his medication and his symptoms, Harold was stunned. "How could a bladder pill affect my brain?" he asked. The answer lies in how these drugs cross the blood-brain barrier, that delicate filter meant to protect our neural tissue from harm. Some anticholinergics are small and fat, soluble enough to slip right through that barrier, binding to receptors deep within memory-related regions like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Over time, this repeated blockade leads to structural changes, brain shrinkage, reduced glucose metabolism, and disrupted neural connectivity. What makes this especially insidious is that the effects don't appear overnight. They build slowly, silently, like rust on a circuit board. By the time symptoms surface, confusion, fogginess, word-finding difficulties, the damage may already be well underway. And yet, this story isn't about fear. It's about awareness, empowerment, and hope. Because the beauty of the human brain is its resilience, the same neuroplasticity that allows us to learn new languages at 70 or take up painting after retirement also allows the brain to heal, if we remove the source of harm and nourish it with what it needs. When Margaret gradually stopped her nightly sleep pills under careful guidance and replaced them with natural sleep strategies and safer alternatives, something remarkable happened. Within 3 months, her clarity began to return. Within 6, she said, "It feels like the lights are turning back on." That's what drives me to stand here today. Because the tragedy isn't just that so many are unknowingly taking a drug that harms their brain. It's that so many doctors don't yet recognize it either. Medicine, as a field, evolves slowly. Sometimes the science races ahead of clinical practice. And when it comes to brain health, every year of delay costs lives, costs memories, costs identities. We live in an era where dementia has become one of the greatest public health challenges of our time. Over 55 million people worldwide live with it, and every year that number climbs. We often talk about the big risk factors: age, genetics, lifestyle. But what about the hidden ones? The ones sitting quietly in our bathrooms, labeled PM? You see, this issue goes beyond biochemistry. It speaks to something deeper: our cultural relationship with quick fixes. We live in a world that offers a pill for every discomfort: can't sleep, take this; can't focus, try that; feel sad, numb it. But rarely do we pause to ask, at what cost? We've built a society that medicates its way out of the human experience, without realizing that the brain we're trying to protect from suffering is the same one we're slowly silencing. I once had a patient, a former teacher named Eleanor, who told me something I'll never forget. She said, "No one ever told me that medicine could steal my mind." She'd been taking various anticholinergic medications for nearly 15 years. First for allergies, then for depression, then for bladder control. By the time she came to see me, she struggled to recall her students' names, her grandchildren's birthdays, even her own address when anxious. When we worked together to taper her off and rebuild her brain health through movement, nutrition, and cognitive stimulation, she regained some of her memory. But she looked at me one day and said, "I feel like I lost years of myself I can't get back." That, ladies and gentlemen, is the real human cost, not statistics, not studies, but the quiet heartbreak of losing pieces of who you are and not knowing why. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. How many more Margarets, Harolds, and Eleanors are out there right now, sitting at their kitchen tables, swallowing pills that promise relief but deliver slow erosion? Every one of us has a responsibility, to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, to ask questions, to look closer, to demand transparency from the medical system. Because awareness is the first antidote to ignorance. We can't control every risk factor for dementia, but we can control what we put into our bodies. We can read labels. We can have honest conversations with our doctors. We can choose lifestyle first, movement, sleep hygiene, mindfulness, before medication when possible. And when medication is necessary, we can ask, is this drug anticholinergic? Does it affect the brain? That single question could change the course of someone's cognitive future. The good news is, the medical field is catching up. Newer alternatives exist: non-anticholinergic medications, behavioral therapies, brain-friendly options. But knowledge has to reach the people who need it most. You. Because ultimately, this is not just about the chemistry of the brain. It's about the chemistry of our choices. Our brains are miraculous. Every memory you have, every face you recall, every melody you hum, it all depends on those delicate electrical connections firing billions of times a second. Those connections deserve protection, not sabotage. Imagine, for a moment, that your brain is like a vast city at night. Millions of lights sparkling in perfect synchrony, each one representing a neuron communicating, connecting, creating the story of who you are. Every thought, every laugh, every cherished memory depends on that intricate illumination. Now picture that with each pill you take that blocks acetylcholine, a few lights go dim. You might not notice at first. After all, the city still glows. But over months, over years, the darkness spreads. And one morning, you realize that certain neighborhoods of your mind are no longer awake. That is the slow, silent damage of chronic anticholinergic use. But here's the breathtaking truth: if we act early, if we identify the threat, stop the exposure, and support the brain, those lights can begin to flicker back on. Neuroplasticity is real. It's not just a buzzword, it's the living miracle of our biology. The brain can rewire, regenerate, and recover, given the right conditions. In my lab, we've seen this firsthand. Patients who once struggled to remember appointments, to follow conversations, to recognize familiar places, begin to regain their cognitive footing after reducing their exposure to these drugs. It's not magic. It's biology meeting awareness. It's the body doing what it's always wanted to do: heal. But it requires something that modern medicine often forgets: patience. We are used to quick fixes, instant relief, pills that promise to take the edge off. But healing the brain isn't about silencing discomfort. It's about understanding it. It's about asking, what is my body trying to tell me? Insomnia may not mean you need a sedative, it may mean your circadian rhythm is off. Anxiety may not mean you need to suppress your neurotransmitters, it may mean you need to breathe, move, reconnect. You see, for decades we've treated the symptoms and ignored the signals. The body whispers long before it screams. And the brain, that mysterious, magnificent organ, has been whispering for years that something is wrong. It's only now that we're beginning to listen. When I speak to younger clinicians, I tell them, every prescription is a story. Every pill we hand to a patient enters a narrative of trust. If we prescribe blindly, we betray that trust. But if we educate, if we empower, we transform medicine from a transaction into a partnership. I remember a medical student asking me once, why would anyone continue prescribing these drugs if we know the risks? It was an honest question, and I gave an honest answer. Because we were trained in an era that believed chemistry could solve everything. But chemistry without consciousness is chaos. The progress of science must always be guided by the wisdom of compassion. Let me share one more story. This one about a man named Robert. He was 75 when his daughter brought him to one of my public lectures. She had noticed her father's growing forgetfulness and thought he was developing early dementia. When I mentioned anticholinergic medications, she turned pale and whispered, "That's Dad." Afterward, they came to see me, and we reviewed his history. He had been taking diphenhydramine nightly for over 20 years. We worked together, slowly tapering him off, introducing mindfulness-based relaxation instead of medication, optimizing his hydration, his magnesium intake, and his sleep rhythm. 6 months later, Robert's daughter wrote me a letter. She said, "He's reading again. He's laughing again. He's back." Now, I don't share that story to give false hope. Not every case reverses. but it shows us what's possible when awareness meets action. So where does that leave us tonight? It leaves us standing at the crossroads of two paths. One that continues the quiet chemical numbing of our brains, and one that awakens us to a new era of conscious health. One that values understanding over sedation, prevention over prescription, and awareness over assumption. The hidden drug destroying our brains isn't just a molecule. It's a mindset. The mindset that says, it's just a pill, it can't hurt, but it can. And it does. And we have the power to stop it. We can start by questioning, not rejecting medicine, but refining it. By collaborating with our healthcare providers to review our medications regularly. By recognizing that the body is not a machine to be silenced, but a language to be learned. And we can nourish the brain in ways that medicine alone never will. Movement. Not extreme exercise, but consistent, mindful movement stimulates neurogenesis. Real food, colorful, alive, unprocessed, fuels the cells that think for you. Deep, restorative sleep, earned naturally, not forced chemically, cleanses the brain through the glymphatic system, washing away toxins like beta-amyloid that accumulate in dementia. Connection, love, laughter, purpose, floods the brain with protective neurochemicals that no pharmaceutical company can bottle. These are not alternative approaches, they are foundational truths. The future of brain health depends on reuniting science with soul. Every time I step on a stage like this, I look out at faces. Some young, some old, and I realize that behind each pair of eyes is an entire universe of memories, emotions, and dreams. And I think, what could be more sacred than protecting that universe? If you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this: your brain is not replaceable. There is no transplant for consciousness. Treat it like the masterpiece it is. The next time you reach for a pill labeled PM, pause. The next time you feel tempted to quiet your discomfort chemically, ask yourself, is there another way? Could I walk instead? Breathe instead? Talk to someone instead? This is not about fear, it's about freedom. The freedom to live awake, to remember who you are, to stay present for the people who love you. Margaret did, Harold did, Robert did, and you can too. So tonight, I leave you with a challenge, a gentle one, but a profound one. Go home, open your medicine cabinet, and look. Read the labels. Research the names. Ask questions. Because your brain, your story, deserves nothing less than your full attention. The hidden drug that destroys memory doesn't stand a chance against an awakened mind. Awareness is the antidote. And maybe, just maybe, the next great revolution in medicine won't come from a lab, but from each of us deciding to protect the light within. Thank you.